10 years later, old school RuneScape still has over 125,000 players at any given time. So what makes OSRS so special? Why do players still choose to play this game all these years later? In response to a declining player base and with the negative reception of RuneScape 3, Jagex decided to run a poll for the release of OSRS, the 2007 version of RuneScape, which many players consider the golden years of the game. Within 2 weeks, the vote had passed for the game to be released, and OSRS was given its own small development team to implement and create content, while the majority of the company still focused on RuneScape 3. 2 years after release, Jagex added the ability to play as a free-to-play player, doubling the player base and changing the community forever. A month later, Jagex added the ability to buy membership with in-game currency called bonds. The bonds allowed players to earn membership within the game by using their coins earned from playing the game. This allowed many players to return to the game they know and love and see if they could restore some of the nostalgia they felt all those years ago. But as we know, nostalgia will bring a player back to a game, but by itself is not enough to keep a player engaged all these years. What keeps the players coming back is the constant stream of new content updates to keep the game fresh and captivating. Unlike a lot of MMOs that release new expansions or new DLC, which then makes the old content useless, or you pay a set price for that specific content which turns away players, OSRS introduces new quests, regions to skill, and items of all levels to give players fun new content to enjoy without ruining the content that is already in the game. All the content is available within one monthly membership package. Some of the updates that come to mind are the Grand Exchange, which already was a feature on RuneScape but was not in OSRS until 2 years after release. The Grand Exchange allows the player to trade items through another source rather than player-to-player trades, which are a lot harder to regulate and allows room for more scams. Motherlode Mine, which I may be biased, but I did not enjoy mining before because of how click intensive it was. Now, it's a lot more enjoyable with the mines. Wintertod, because fire making is, let's be honest, pretty useless, and having a fast method that can also make you a small amount of cash is nice. Rooftop Agility, which changed my enjoyment of agility because of how chill it is. Unless you do agility and high alching at the same time, but let's be real, I'm not about that life. And OSRS also released a full mobile app, which I will talk about more in depth later on. Because OSRS does leave content open-ended, the old content never becomes useless. It's all dependent on where you are in your journey. The content itself is not devalued from its original state. Every piece of content together is needed for the complete journey. And because the amount of content is so massive, you never run out of new things to do. I know I have spent years in OSRS without touching certain pieces of content. Heck, I still haven't played some content till this day. OSRS has a unique approach to creating new content. Every piece of content created is player driven. That means that any update presented to the community needs a 70% yes rate to be added into the game. This allows for the player to feel a sense of ownership over the game, while also keeping the focus of the game to what the majority of players enjoy. The players are also able to submit their own unique content ideas straight to Jagex. I don't know of any other game fully driven by the community, which helps set OSRS apart from any other MMO you can find. But even with all the content updates, the simplicity of old school RuneScape stays the same. Where some games will get more confusing and convoluted the more updates they put out, OSRS is the same. The accessibility of the game is no doubt a main reason the game has remained popular over the years. The point and click controls are easy to learn for new players and easy to remember for returning players. The world, although massive, is easy to understand, and with the world map you can find any location with low effort. There are no character classes, no bad versus good. Every player has the whole world to explore, can use every skill and use any item assuming they have the required level. And unlike most MMO games, when you take a break, you come right back to the same game. Whereas some games punish you for not being active, Old school RuneScape allows the hardcore players to play at their own pace without penalizing the casual player. Because the core of the game is individual play, it allows for variable commitment. Whether you want to play 1 hour a week or 10 hours a day, you can still make meaningful progress. Few games on the market respect a schedule. Most games actually do the opposite. They will force you to do daily objectives or limited time missions to force players to continue playing the game. Old school RuneScape is the opposite. It's like they encourage breaks with their gameplay. There's even a saying, "You never quit RuneScape, in reality you take a really long break." It's a bit of a joke, as I'm sure a lot of players have quit the game over the years, but the core of the message is the same. There's nothing worse than leaving a game for a year because life happens, and you come back and you feel like your whole account is devalued or useless. In old school RuneScape, if I'm chopping trees with a rune axe, I log out, come back a year later, the axe and tree still have the same use as they did before. There's been other MMOs over the years where I log in and it's a completely different game than I played before, whereas OSRS has been able to keep their identity over the years. And if for some reason you are confused, the accessibility to quality information is second to none. You have the gold standard of game documentation, the old school wiki, the hub for every single thing you will ever need to complete your goals. The wiki has given me unreasonably high expectations for every other game with a wiki, and I am always disappointed. Whether you need a training guide for a specific skill, help completing a quest, or some information about a specific item, the wiki is always up to date with all of the details. You're able to track the price of a specific item, find the fastest way to get to a specific location, or calculate how much it will cost for you to get a certain level in a certain skill. I mean, there's not one piece of information you won't find on the wiki. It's actually nuts. On top of the wiki, the OSRS YouTube community might be one of the best, if not the best, when it comes to information on a game. You once again have quest guides, skill guides, beginner tips, money making, and anything else you can need. Basically all of the information you can find on the wiki, but in show and tell form. Shout out to all those OSRS content creators, because the guides they put out take months, if not years, to create, and they do it all for the love of the game. 20 years ago, when I started playing the original RuneScape, this type of content wasn't available. My RuneScape YouTube was RS music videos, which, don't get me wrong, are super sick. If you haven't had the pleasure of watching one, I definitely advise doing so. You won't be disappointed. Even recently, OSRS has incorporated more accessibility into the game by officially partnering with RuneLight, even adding an option for it to the new Jagex launcher. RuneLight is by far the biggest quality of life improvement I have seen in any game. To name a few of the biggest features, there is an XP tracker, which helps you calculate how long you will need to do an activity for to reach your current goal. Treasure trail and puzzle box solvers, which significantly speed up clue scrolls. Timers for activities like farm runs and birdhouse runs, which make it tremendously easier to track when you need to do a run. And a quest helper, which shows you step by step how to complete a quest and which items you need. As is a theme of old school RuneScape, RuneLight is a tool to allow players who are not 100% familiar or an expert at the game to have a quality experience. And most gamers would agree, if the last experience you have on a game is enjoyable, it makes you want to come back and play again. But even with all the accessibility available, every game is determined off of one thing, and that's the gameplay. OSRS has some of the most diverse gameplay on the market. In RuneScape, the player has the ability to complete quests, train skills, compete in minigames, or fight in player versus player combat, to name a few. Most MMOs focus on one thing specifically, where old school RuneScape has a focus on everything. Where OSRS flourishes is the freedom to complete the content however you see fit. Most MMOs follow a more linear path or story, with combat being the main focus. OSRS allows the player to choose how they want to progress. And because of how the skills and quests are laid out, the lines between a beginner, intermediate, and expert player are all blurred. I've talked about a game like DC Universe where the first 30 levels are open world story and the rest of the game is instanced encounters. In RuneScape, that is not how it works. From the minute you leave Tutorial Island to the endgame content, you will complete different quests, level up skills, and kill enemies. Nothing changes, the content gets harder and you unlock more options. It's simple to understand, and unlike most games that say, you have to get to the end game to start having fun, RuneScape starts at fun and progresses as you level up. When you leave Tutorial Island and hit Lumbridge at level 3, the game is wide open for you to explore how you see fit. There are 4 different types of skills in old school RuneScape with 23 separate skills total. 15 of the skills are free to play, with 8 of the skills being a part of the members only content. There are combat skills, gathering skills, production skills, and utility skills. Each skill can be trained through different methods or trained together with another skill when possible. Skills are one of the main focuses of the game, as most players have a goal of getting to level 99 in every skill to be awarded the max cape. Skills are the player's attributes that are trained by repeating activities to gain experience and reach the next level. Every skill has a different level of usefulness depending on the other features it helps you with inside of your journey. Utility skills are primarily trained to help with quality of life within the game. Agility allows the player shortcuts around the world, saving you time as well as restoring your energy at a faster rate. Construction allows the player to build their own house, which gives mid to high level players more ways to get around the world faster, as well as some other benefits like restoring stats or changing your spellbook. Gathering and production skills are more or less how items are created in the game. If you mine some ore, you can go to a furnace to smith the item into a weapon or armor piece. If you chop a log from a tree, you can fletch the log into a bow. If you fish, you can cook the fish, which then could be used to heal some health. You kind of get the point. If you are not playing as an Ironman, which I will go in more depth with later on, then most of the gathering skills are where people who don't want to do combat make their money. The skills have low entry costs to start them, needing only a tool to gather the resources. Combat skills are the way you fight enemies in this game. This is known as the combat triangle of range, magic, and melee, but I will talk about the combat system later on. The combat skills are straightforward. You level up your skills to be able to fight high level enemies who will give you better rewards. Because there are 23 different skills in total, it's very easy to switch up content without getting bored. If you were to not touch any other piece of content besides skills and go for 99 in each of those skills, it would take an average player about 2,500 hours. If you play 2 hours a day, all 365 days a year, that would be 730 hours a year. So that's about 3.5 years of playing the game daily and efficiently to complete every skill. And I can tell you firsthand, most players are not playing the game efficiently. Because the game is built on freedom of choice, some players choose to use the more peaceful method, called AFK-scape. AFK means away from keyboard, which is the art of not having to be at your computer or have your mouse in hand clicking to still gain XP or complete a task. In about every skill, you can find methods which are slower in XP, but allow the player to click less intensely and less often. It's a smart strategy that's allowed old school RuneScape to stay top of mind over all these years. Take a game like League of Legends for instance. Unless you have a 50-second death timer, you are clicking and moving with no rest time. Not to mention each game takes roughly 30 minutes, unless you play ARAM, but let's be honest, those can still be pretty long. If I want to play a game like League, I have to set aside at least 30 minutes of undivided attention. Over time, as kids become adults and get more responsibilities, there is less and less time for undivided attention to games. In old school RuneScape, I can choose to do a skill like woodcutting, where I click on a tree, there's no threat, which allows me to complete other tasks on the side. Whether it's watching a movie, doing some homework, doing real work, or even doing cooking or cleaning, my character is still chopping away gaining XP. Heck, if you play old school, you're probably playing while watching this. So what happens when you do get some free time where you can use your full attention to game? Well, you're going to choose the game you play daily. That time is now spent towards any activities in game you need your attention to do, whether it be quest, diaries, clue scrolls, PvP, minigames, or anything else your heart desires. And then when you add the ability to play mobile now on phones, no other game in the genre is able to compare. Whereas some games may have some features or a companion app, old school RuneScape is a full game designed for mobile. You can play on your computer, log out, drive to where you need to go, log back in on your phone, and continue playing. No matter where you are playing, your account is on the same server. Since you are always grinding towards some goal, it's nice to be able to have access to old school RuneScape at any moment. Mobile even is compared to RuneLight in a lot of ways, having features that are easier to use on mobile than it is even on a computer. I'll use the drop feature as an example. On mobile, I can use both my thumbs to spam drop inventories if I'm doing something like barbarian fishing. On the computer, I am forced to click drop every single time. Now that may be a small example, but there are tons of little details that make the mobile experience easy for users. The mobile surge of 2019 still has not came back down from the numbers, doubling the player base from 50,000 to at least 100,000 at any given time. Which goes to show you how important mobile is to the longevity of the game. There are obvious downsides to playing on a phone like high-level combat or an activity like questing, but the positives far outweigh any negatives that may come with it. On paper, old school seems like it shouldn't work. Like, how can I chop a tree for 100 hours and get enjoyment out of it? Part of the reason is because of the way Jagex set up the XP for the skills. To get to level 99, it takes a little bit over 13 million XP, but to reach halfway to 99, you actually need to reach level 92, which is about 6.5 million XP. Well, why am I saying that? Well, what do we as humans love more than anything? Instant gratification. RuneScape somehow perfected the art of gratification, allowing players early on in their journey to get milestone after milestone, which makes you feel good about yourself. It's an easy way to keep players invested by continually giving the user more and more rewards. By the time you are invested in the game, milestones slow down, but the enjoyment is already there. And then comes the rest of the game. As you raise your skills, you unlock the requirements for more quests, which are the story for old school RuneScape. These are not fetch quests or kill a monster for no reason. Each quest in a specific series will share a common and continuing plotline. Within each individual quest, there is a unique protagonist, antagonist, and general storyline, and they're pretty entertaining. This is why all the quests can blend together through any part of the game. Whereas some MMOs force you into new areas for every new section of questing, you will return to the same locations at different times of your journey. Take the Elven storyline for instance. The first quest in the series is a novice level quest with no requirements to start, but as you uncover the mystery of the plague through a few more quests, you will finally resolve the mystery and overthrow the king. If you want to complete the Grandmaster difficulty quest, you will need 70 and 8 different skills, as well as some recommended levels for combat. The Grandmaster quest unlocks a whole new area for skilling and some other rewards, so as you would expect, players will continue through a natural progression as they progress their character in all aspects. This entices players to not only focus on one small part of the game, but the whole game. And I have to say, I speed through dialogue faster than I would like to admit. I skim the text pretty quickly usually, but there are some entertaining stories in old school RuneScape. My favorite is the Fremenic storyline. I find it to be lighthearted, pretty entertaining, but also has a lot of different dynamics. What I like most about the quests in old school RuneScape is the uniqueness of each quest, and that's even seen in the requirements. In some MMOs, the only requirement is a higher combat level to fight high level monsters or to get into the next set of dungeons. Sure, there is some of that in old school, but each quest takes a different set of skills to do the job. On top of the main quests that make up the quest point cape, there are mini quests and achievement diaries to also complete. Mini quests are small tasks, sometimes taking place during another larger quest line or a standalone quest that didn't quite make the cut of a real quest. Achievement diaries are a set of tasks in each unique area of the game that test the player's skill and knowledge in that specific area while rewarding the player with unique benefits and rewards you cannot earn anywhere else. Each area has 4 sets of tasks, ranked from easy to elite. Like I have said earlier, although the tasks are ranked from easy to elite, the lines between the levels are blurred. You may have the hard task completed for one area, while you only have the easy task completed for another area. It's all based on how you choose to play the game and what activities you enjoy doing. You may be wondering, well, if it takes 3.5 years to get every skill to 99 and a few more months to complete every quest, what have people been doing for the rest of the years to keep this game alive and well? Enter the Ironman. In simple terms, creating an Ironman account forces the player to be self-sufficient. Ironman are locked out of interaction with other players like PvP, trading, Grand Exchange, and other group activities. This is how a lot of experienced players choose to spend their time. It forces the user to spend more time collecting resources or items for themselves instead of being able to buy them from other players. You will have to use every skill to help you progress in another skill since you can't skip over part of the skills or a part of the skill and buy the materials. A great example of that is construction. If you need planks, you will need to either chop logs and then have them turned to planks, or kill monsters that give you the planks. Ironman mode is for the player who wants a completely solo experience. Over the years, Jagex has released multiple different Ironman modes for players who want to keep the game fresh, even going as far as creating a group Ironman so that you can enjoy the mode with friends for the players who want the challenge while still having some community of friends to play with. Some players go as far as playing their main account on their phone with another on their computer. This is a mode I don't have any experience in because I personally don't want to spend the extra time getting items to be able to do another skill, but I respect the grind of an Ironman. So what if chopping trees gets boring, you don't want to complete a quest, and you don't want to create an Ironman? Well, you still have PKing, which is short for player killing. PvP is one of the most popular modes in old school RuneScape, with players even going as far as making an account specifically for PKing called a peer. Peers are accounts who limit or entirely avoid training one or more combat skills, usually defense, give themselves an advantage offensively against a player of the same combat level. PKing can either be done against non-suspecting players in the wilderness, usually this is done out of boredom, at least that's what I suspect, or against other PvP players on designated PvP worlds. I find PvP to be a lot more fun. The only downside is the cost and practice it takes to get good. I will talk about the combat a bit more in the combat section, but PvP utilizes the combat system to the fullest. The basics will not win you fights. I like watching players fight it out, but I don't have the skill level or patience to learn how to be good at PvP, especially since you lose your items when you die. It can take a good amount of cash to get past the learning curve, so I tend not to fight PvP unless it's a minigame like Soul Wars or another safe area where I keep my items. Minigames themselves may be the most underrated aspect of old school RuneScape. On the surface, minigames are a way to break up a repetitive task with either a skilling or combat focus where you will team up with other players and sometimes fight against other players. But they also have some of the best rewards for accounts to get. Some of my favorites are Pest Control, Barbarian Assault, Soul Wars, and Castle Wars. Pest Control is a game with up to 25 players who all work together to defend the Void Knight while taking down the portals around the area. This is my go-to when I am bored because it always brings me a lot of fun and still gives me some combat XP. It also unlocks Void Armor, which is a type of hybrid armor that most players will use throughout the game. Barbarian Assault is a 5-player minigame where the team must work together to defeat all 10 waves of Penance monsters, finishing with the Penance Queen. This game may be most famous for the Fighter Torso, which is one of the most used combat items in old school RuneScape that you can only unlock through the minigame. It's my personal favorite, but it does take a lot more focus as you will need to focus on your specific role to get the rounds done quickly. Soul Wars is a PvP minigame where each team will earn soul fragments to weaken the opposing team's avatar and defeat it more times than the other team. Castle Wars, in essence, is medieval capture the flag. I usually tend to enjoy the combat related minigames more, especially ones with PvP, as it allows me to learn the combat system better without risking my items. But you may be wondering, who would want to play a game or compete in PvP with such a basic combat system? But the combat simplicity is exactly why people switched over from RuneScape 3 to Old School. Compared to a lot of MMO games on the market, Old School is easy to learn on an entry level. OSRS is built around a tick system. Every tick of OSRS is 0.6 seconds more or less depending on server lag. This allows players to learn the system and train accordingly. Every weapon is able to attack at a different speed, which makes it easy to track in combat. The floor of OSRS is all tiles, so you are able to see where attacks come from at high levels and you're able to dodge. For most combat scenarios, you don't need any advanced movement or mechanics to win a fight. And the combat triangle is easy to learn. Melee is strong against range, range is strong against magic, and magic is strong against melee. But as you get into the deeper intricacies of combat, you will notice it gets a lot harder. You can fight monsters like Bloodveld, where although you are using a melee weapon to attack them, it is best to use magic armor as they attack with a magic melee attack. This allows the player freedom to build their character and learn about the monster you are facing. You have something like prayer flicking, which is how users have found to keep prayer points for a longer time by flicking the protection player right when you are hit with an attack. This is the way players have learned to manipulate the tick-based combat of old school RuneScape. It may seem like an exploit in a lot of ways, but it takes a lot of work and practice to perfect it, especially for high level combat. And for those of us that don't want to use it on a daily basis, you're not obligated to learn it. As you get to high level bosses and other content, you start using prayer switches and gear swaps while also dodging mechanics from the monsters. For any player that does want a hard combat challenge when they are playing MMOs, then that will be where they spend the most of their time. Bosses have the most risk reward in old school RuneScape. Usually, you will need higher requirements and gear to be able to take on the bosses, and you will be rewarded handsomely when you defeat the bosses. If there was any true endgame of old school RuneScape, then bossing would be it. There are a ton of new enemies and monsters being added into the game, so players that have perfected all the content up to a certain point will always have a new challenge to tackle. I choose to stay away from this type of content because I don't have the mental capacity to always be perfect in my movement or mechanics, but I commend the players that are able to do it. So how do scaling, combat, and PvP tie together? Well, that's where the beauty of the economy comes into play. The general economy of old school RuneScape is dominated by one specific currency, gold. Assuming you are a normal account, you are able to earn gold from killing monsters or selling items. For the first 2 years of old school RuneScape, players would have to make trades through the open world and public spaces until Jagex brought back the best update that RuneScape has ever introduced, the Grand Exchange. The Grand Exchange is a place where players are able to use a structured market of every traded item in old school RuneScape. The Grand Exchange uses base prices for every tradable item in OSRS. This has helped keep players from getting scammed or overpaying, since when you would trade to another player directly, it is a lot harder to judge how much something should cost. The prices are based off of the value of the item in the game, but also how much volume of the item there is. If you have a weapon that can only be dropped from high level monsters like an Abyssal Whip, the the price is going to be higher since players will want that item but are not able to get it themselves. Resources like logs that can be easily obtained by a lot of players by chopping down a tree will go for a lot lower price. Earlier I spoke about how players are able to take breaks and come back to the same game. The market is a big reason for that. Like I stated, if I log out for 6 months with the rune axe chopping trees, axe may go down a small amount in value because there is more circulating the market, but not enough of a difference where it changes the game. The rune axe still holds the same value in woodcutting. If you look at the price chart for a rune axe, you can see that over the past 6 months, the price has only fluctuated about 300 coins. So if you haven't played during that time, you may have spent 300 more coins than you could have now. That's such a small difference that allows player freedom from those breaks I talked about earlier. And all of that content is able to thrive because of the community that Old School RuneScape has built. I know a lot of people have differing opinions when it comes to the community, but generally speaking, OSRS is some of the most helpful players you can find in any game. One of the biggest turnoffs for myself in an MMO game is a community that thinks they are too good for new players. They either expect you to be maxed or to be playing as efficiently as possible. Because OSRS is mainly a solo game, when you do squad up with other players or ask for advice, you are usually greeted with some helpful information. I usually go to my clan that I joined, and someone is almost always able to answer the question I have or help me with something I'm stuck on. There are always going to be toxic players in a game that is unavoidable, but the majority of the time players are extremely helpful or at least doing their own thing and not bothering what you're doing. Just another reason OSRS makes it easy to play the game continually over the years. I look forward to getting a bunch of congratulations from my clan members after I complete a hard goal, or even getting tips on how to complete that goal. So as you can tell, with all the content that OSRS has to offer, the game is a long-term MMO with a bunch of short-term goals inside of it. The general goal for all accounts is completion, although completion is different for each player. With most games, completion means getting to either the max level or completing all the content, while Old School RuneScape allows for the player to choose what that is for themselves. Is your only goal to get the quest cape? Go for it. You want 99 in every skill? Awesome. Or the goal can be as simple as hopping on the game to play for fun. That works as well. I mean, technically there is a way to complete the game, which I couldn't even write down because of how many different things you would have to do. But to really fully complete the game, there really is no way. It's a game that can be played forever while still finding new things to do. That's what has made Old School RuneScape unique after all of these years. Every player starts with small goals, but as they check the next box off their list, a new goal pops up to keep the players engaged. It's remarkable what Old School RuneScape has been able to do after all these years, and I for one don't see it ending anytime soon. To me, RuneScape is what gaming should be. Freedom, fun, community, and just an overall good time. I'm interested to see where the game will be in another 10 years. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like, it does help me out a lot, and check out my retrospective on DC Universe, I'll link it on the screen right now. Subscribe if you are new here and you do enjoy these long form gaming essays, and I'll see you guys next time.